I, Stéphane Poulain, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help us all. I'd like to have this morning as my truthful biography. I know in Canada you have to prove your innocence because you are pinned guilty from the start. But for the rest of the world, I will tell you my truthful biography. I was born 1976, April 12, at 10:12 p.m. in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. The General Hospital weighed me in at 7.2, beautiful blonde-haired, green-eyed baby boy. My blue-eyed, brown-haired mother, named Jeanne d'Arc, named me Stéphane. A writer of her own, Jeanne d'Arc wished only to have a great life for her newborn son. She also wanted me to be and to stay French, for camouflage on the extraordinary stories and possibilities that I could be far beyond what life was ready for and expecting. As the neighbors, family, friends looked at me and called out, "What an angel," thousands of compliments came about, and so by the time I turned 3 months old, baptism in the Ottawa Cathedral opened doors and lights above and beyond any of our controls and extents of the stories from my real life biography will blow your mind away. Far beyond anything you have ever read or seen before. The truth. Now rest assured, after knowing who we and I am, this story is far from being dull and gray and might shock almost everybody. Being the most difficult thing for me to do, writing about my extraordinary life, as I have been traumatized by it my entire life. So please stay calm, remain under control. Breathing is a good way to get through this story told. The first years of my life was probably the only normal time spent on planet Earth so far. As I was the second child of this little family, my older sister, my father, and my mother moved around quite a bit. By the time I was 9 months old, I had already started walking and running. Speaking, on the other hand, was a little different. As I was learning 2 languages, I also, like most, took just a little longer to develop speech. With our lives beginning, a new surprise came about. My whole year of normal human life was about to end. Some might think due to jealousy. I am more inclined on saying due to the fact that my father was gone all the time, my older sister didn't care, and now Mom was about getting ready to give birth to whom became my little sister. So time for me was about to become something greater than God Himself. For the next year of my life, things really changed. Every time I needed something was, "Go ask your sister." Every time I wanted a hug was, "Not right now. Can't you see I'm busy? Get out of here. Sister this, sister that." To tell you the truth, I really thought this was normal, typical human behavior. I was not a baby that cried at all. But my sister was very vocal. And so even though I was having trouble reaching Mom, I didn't give up on what Grandma first told me. "Your sister is kind of sad. Let's see if we can make her laugh." This being my father's parents' house. Less than 2 years of age, my energy levels rose up real high and real fast. And so my grandpa and my father started showing me how to dance. And so yes, folks, before my 3rd birthday, older brother Stefan, was on stage performing live for a crowd well into the hundreds on Donald Street in Ottawa, Ontario. Barely 3 years of age, stardom was started and well on its way. My first performance ever was tap dancing and singing to your popular music for all those who loved it. Two and a half years of age and ready to move on one more time. Mom, Dad, myself, and now both my sisters moved to the Carson Groves from the lower mainland of the cities. My older sister being 6, myself at the age of 2.5, and my brand new loud baby sister arriving in our new home for the first time. I froze. Just like that, outside our new house, I stared into the distance and saw someone trying to pay attention to me. A few neighbors came out to meet and greet. That's when I saw Michelle and her brother Jason playing on the large sidewalk. I looked at my house, saw Mom was busy, and decided to walk over on my own. I was introduced to Michelle and Jason as I introduced myself to Michelle's mother out on our steps. She was watching me distance myself from my house and approach slowly towards whom became my first ever friends. For the first little while, I was only interested in getting to learn and know more about Michelle. A year went by before I became a little more popular. By now, all the neighbors' kids knew me, and we seemed to all really get along, or so I believed. By this time, all the time I would spend inside the house was kept getting good at everything. Back then, I wanted to impress Michelle with dancing moves and more. So every minute and every chance I had was spent getting better. Well, folks, I got good. Real good. And every time I would step outside, I would freeze and stare at Michelle's house to see if she would come out and play, but often enough she wasn't there. So life had to go on, right? Right. And so life did go on. I started performing more. I started devoting my time in figuring out how to and what next, because I wanted perfection. Searching for it and working on achieving took all of my time. From there, friendship list grew more and more. By now I felt like I had 12 sisters, a bunch of brothers, and one possible flower prospect. Life was so much easier back then. We were all about getting ready to start school back then, but just before we did, something happened to me. I was beaten, forced to my knees, and told how stupid I was. We did something, and all this happened to me. I was holding on to my father's tool, making sure my baby sister didn't hurt herself with it. Grandma and Mom had just put her on the floor, and I had remembered what my dad and uncle had just told me. They are very dangerous, don't touch them. And so trying to do the right thing, trying to avoid a situation that could have someone else hurt, I got punished. I guess I should have listened to my father, or had the guts to tell him, hey, put your stuff away. You're done with it, right? Instead, my father gave me my first spanking. I was so red, I couldn't sit down for a whole week. Then I was forced to the floors on my knees. I understand that the Catholics punish that way in order for us to get better and to train. But I also understand that aside from a tap on a hand, none of it should ever happen. So anyhow, that beating took a toll on myself and my mother. Grandma took good care of the situation afterwards, but not before scaring the crap out of me, and so began the writings of our evolutions. After this beating, I was having a few difficulties reaching even Michelle, almost like she knew. I hadn't told anybody at all. It actually took me 25 years to start talking about that. Nonetheless, my list of brothers started growing, and our neighbors started separating me from Michelle. Now I was very confused, and I really had no one to talk to at all. Life began to be very difficult, learning to keep all my thoughts to myself, learning to deal with it all on my own. Remember, folks, I was 3 years old, and yes, 100% alone. And so in my biography, I took this chance to tell both my parents where I thought they should go. No disrespect is meant from my part, but letting you know how I truly feel on everything you guys really did to me, and having to keep going through life like everything's la-di-da is the most difficult any man has ever had to do on this planet. And now I understand why they killed Jesus. Anyhow, still before we started school, another major episode happened to our family, mainly to me and my younger sister. Mom and Dad were gone. A tall, dark-haired woman used to babysit us. Well, she had to do something once, and had asked her brother Mark to watch over us. Well, world, what a journey. This man ended up molesting me and my sister. A few other boys also. For the longest time, the whole world was confused about it. I had tried to tell Mom, but she did not believe me. Less than a month later, my younger sister tried to tell my mother. There, she believed that one. But then they started blaming Dad. And I was fucked up. Because I had told Mom, Mark, not Mo. And so I thought something wasn't right. My own mother named my baby brother after my child molester. So you can imagine the tortures that went through my own head my whole life. I've never been jealous of my brother. I've been afraid to wanting to kill him, even though he's not responsible for what happened. The neighbor was. I didn't know any better. Me, I was almost 4. I was scared every day of my life. I never had thoughts of hurting anyone. Back then, today even. But I did want to go to heaven as fast as God would have allowed it. Now, as God is my witness, everything in this story is real. I had a father that was too busy and somewhat angry at me. I had a mother unaware of anything. I had a neighbor that was allowed to molest us, get away with it, and then name my baby brother after him, so I'd get reminded of it every fucking day. School was starting, but school was no better than home. And this is when fires were being set everywhere, and not by my hand or my mind at all. One night, me and my sister wanted to play hide and seek, but I was 4, it was 4, and I had no lights. We didn't want to wake up Mom, so we looked for a flashlight. None were found, so we kept playing anyways. Little moments later, I found my mother's lighter on the dresser, and so I tried using that as a flashlight. I was close to the fabric material that was ripped underneath my mother's bed, and it caught on fire. It was truly an accident. We woke up everybody to save us and to save them. My older sister quickly helped put it out. This accident was nothing but an accident that scared me even more than all of you. Because of this little incident, my mother then had me checked out by a few doctors to be on the safe side. And these doctors were saying all kinds of shit that made no sense. They were trying to tell maybe I was revenging. Maybe they knew why. All I was saying when I was hearing this is bullshit. They know nothing. This, my friends, was my only ever accident, ever mistake in my entire life. I should have stayed in bed all night. I did not mean for it to happen, but really, I had no control over everything else that happened in the future. The doctors tried contemplating motive and more, but they were never right on the button. Those created the smart ones in me. I learned how to read, write, both French, English, more languages, including music, before I was 5. Already a star, and already being sabotaged. Within the next year of my life, a few neighbors were put to blame for a few neighborhood fires. Nonetheless, it started getting freakier by the day. Adults contemplating if I had anything to do with it, or if it was just an accident. They all got it wrong. I, Stéphane Poulet, have never set fire to anything. Anyhow, I was getting older and a lot smarter. And one night, another fire was set to the house on the corner. a few down from ours. Every house in the neighborhood was up and awake to see the commotion. As I went outside to see, I noticed the flames of the fire and then quickly looked around. A few days ago, I had just found out that we were all on the same gas line. Well, I got scared, and I noticed Michelle and her family weren't outside. I went inside the house to put my boots on, and I was ready to go save her. Just like the movie Braveheart. Except we weren't the ones setting fire. My mother told me to stay right there. It would all be over soon. I asked her what about Michelle, and that's when she told me she would be alright. The next day I started getting really fucked up. Nightmares, thoughts of greater tortures, and so much more. I ran away many times, always in hopes I would find my Michelle. But our times together were getting smaller and smaller, and I had nowhere else to turn. It was eating me from the inside out. Sometimes I would walk up to her house to knock and say hello, but the courage was always being demolished. Over the next few months, those thoughts were having me act out all kinds of weird shit. The more I acted out, the less outside time I got to enjoy. The less outside time I got to enjoy, the less chance that my Michelle would still be mine in the future. Well, the good Lord didn't give up on me just yet, and He never will. I prayed and prayed every night. My dreams got freaky, and my thoughts became above and beyond. I told God once, when I had walked into church, that the minute He would take my Michelle away, the world would never see anything real from me again. Well, school started. The greatest teachers in the world, from pre-kindergarten to grade 2. Soft, caring, and very knowledgeable. Here I kept myself very active, took part in all the sports activities. I used to climb the schools and run on the rooftops. I learned how to climb really high, tangle off ropes, just like Spider-Man, and learned all the rules of all the games. I also started to put some film work together. That far long ago, folks, and partook in a lot of performances. Technically, learning proper etiquette to life, and where I met a lot of my new friends. The two that do come to mind, and Mireille, one sat with in class, even partook in church activities, and more like the Beavers and Scouts. Annie, one who left me behind in grade 1, she was bumped up to grade 2 right after she opened up to me. Almost felt like they were separating us on purpose, because my school grades were just as good as hers, even if not better. Or maybe it was because they wanted me to focus on my academics first. I can't answer that today, because I truly don't know. I like to look for the good in everything. Anyhow, before grade 1, I was diagnosed with an appendicitis and had to be hospitalized for... Anyhow, before grade 1, I was diagnosed with an appendicitis and had to be hospitalized for weeks. I was under sedation and recovered pretty well. Actually, no major complications there for that part at all. Wasn't long after this that my mother was being approached by other doctors who tried convincing her I might need further sedation. World, I don't. Talks about Ritalin and other chemicals were mentioned in front of me. This terrorized me forever. I didn't want to be sedated. I had already been hurt and molested with no one believing me. And I was now terrified of the whole world and very confused. By now, no more courage was left. My brains were trying to tell me that it was okay to be like that. And my brain, heart, and soul shut off to the world. God granted me one last try with Michelle. She came to me one weekend asking me to go for a walk with her, just like the movie Lion King, to the tree hole, Pride Rock. I was the happiest kid in the world. Me? Cool. Right on. Let's go. When she said hurry before my mom sees us. And so off we were. We started walking towards the entrance of the famous Green Forest Park that is totally gone today. And so off we were. We started walking towards the entrance, holding on to each other's hand. Michelle held on to my left hand. We got sweaty, walked right into the forest. The trail led us to this rock that we used to call Pride Rock. We sat there for a few minutes, then got up to walk further in where we stopped at the tree with the hole in it. All this feeling of excitement brought on thoughts of maybe sharing another kiss. And so, in front of that tree and God, we kissed. Within a fraction of a second, the whole world came apart again. We were pulled in all directions, lifted from the ground, and carried like potato bags all the way home, where we were punished and scared forever. And where I never got to see my Michelle again. I then built a little courage, asking around and trying to find out how to. I went knocking at her mom's door is where her mom started refusing me at the door. I didn't want to let go. I didn't want anyone or anything else either. That's when I told myself I would concentrate on accomplishing what I had started and would find your heart again by the time we would be 16. Anyhow, our journey wasn't quite complete until after she moved away. Months after her mom refused me from entering Michelle's birthday party, she told me it was her birthday and this time it was no boys were allowed. Joke was on me. By this time my brother was alive and walking. Nonetheless, every kid in the neighborhood was there. And I had just been shunned by them all. Michelle knew nothing about it. Or so I think. I went back home and never tried again. Never. I actually started to stare out into the distance all the time. My mind began being scared all the time on its own. I had started to hide myself in the baby's closet, in cupboards. I found myself passing out and walking up in the weirdest places in the house, like the cupboards, behind the couch, even beside plants. Too much sedation. I really thought I was going to be hurt some more. I still found myself keeping it all in, as my mother seemed not to believe me, and the only friend I had opened up to wasn't allowed to communicate with me. My father had given me good advice, and so I tried to make sense of it and held on to it as long as I could. My first day of school, my father had to hold a bus in order for me to run home and get mittens, and thus began my running career. Running as fast as I could, I made it all the way home and back on time for the bus, thanking my father. Never saw him again. All the talks in the house were out of proportions. Mom being upset at Dad for doing so, even after I told her that it wasn't him. Even after I told her who it was. It had started a war inside my head, and one that has been there forever. Holding on so long wasn't the way to go, but you try telling that to this kid that just went through all that. Nonetheless, weeks later, my father was packing his things and getting ready to leave us. He was putting suitcases in the trunk of my uncle's car behind the house. I asked my mother if I could go with him, and Mom said no. I don't ever recall crying for anything at all as a child, but then my emotions had been ripped apart and I was really lost. Days after, I was staring out the back window, thinking about my father. Michelle came to mind, but I couldn't seem to understand or even try to not think about Michelle at that time. Anyhow, moments later, my eyes started bawling. And through the storm, out the window, lightning came flashing down and seemed to have gone through the back window where I was standing, through the house, and out the front door, leading me straight outside. To go see if it was real or not, I started running and check. It was raining in the back, clouds everywhere in the back, yet in the front, there was sunshine. And so I found myself looking towards Michelle's house one last time, like some kind of sign. When I talked about this as an adult, the people thought I was crazy. As a child, I was afraid, and nobody believed me anyway, so I kept it to myself, only to find out that it would affect me this way 30 years later. Only to find out that that was the best thing I have ever done. Holding on to someone. It gave me the chance to find God on my own and even create a bigger, better connection between the two. These were the days where my mother introduced me to friends that practiced taekwondo and jiu-jitsu and karate and kickboxing, and so they started training me, saying it would rebuild my confidence, and one day I would be better for it and I would be able to thank them. And I do. I do thank the Andersons and all that surrounds them. I then decided to keep Michelle as my imaginary friend, and I would wait till her mother would say okay. As I kept training to try and eventually one day fix this brain damage that's making me hesitate my words, I ask nothing more than for your patience for just a few more minutes. I'll return in a second with the rest of my truthful biography. Thank you. And so, I started and kept training additionally out in the woods behind the house for special skills, and I was also forced to learn and study music. By whom, you might say? Simple. God forced me. Meaning I made the decision myself, and if in God the world trusts, then they would have no fear about my decision making, especially if I did it right and properly all the way through. Nonetheless, after surviving that, my thoughts got wacky. So when I tried writing at first, you could imagine how psychological it would have turned out to be. And besides, just free play, the organ cried a lot for what I was missing. And my drum kit never lasted all day before I would decide to destroy the crap out of the sticks and beats. I'd throw them down the stairs and then would ask my mom, what just happened? The neighbors thought I was a troubled child. Well, they were right. I was in trouble. But I was confused and really had no one to help. At school, I was a little too excited, and so I spent a lot of time at the principal's office, where I was punished with a meter, beaten on the hands for trying to write with my left hand. Or in my head, Principal Gauthier could have been related to Michelle, and so they tried to beat me because Michelle loved me as I loved her. Nonetheless, it felt like the whole world was coming down on me. I somehow one day grew balls and new courage and decided not to go back to school. I was in the schoolyard when the bell rang, and I had just told myself, no, you took my Michelle away, I ain't going back to school. Fifth path, just like the movie, within seconds, I picked myself right off the ground after falling 15-20 feet up and suffering my first concussion. I was 5 years old, folks. To tell you the truth, it knocked me right out. I broke my nose, I broke my glasses, fracturing my skull and damaging my back. Bam, my journey with Michelle was over. How, you would say? When I got back up in the yard, I awoken with no memory at all. God took it away from me, and it did not hurt. But then He gave it back to me. So you guys can laugh about me. Under those monkey bars, I stared around at the sky and more before I started asking myself questions. And where I was, I suffered an anxiety attack that made me faint. Well, folks, this is the reason why the whole world has been confused about it all. And that's when I became Stephen King, the writer. To get back home, even my name was gone from my head. Luckily for me, I had a few friends from school that guided me home that day. I still nonetheless had to try to do it all. Figure out who I was, who my mother was, and so much more. Who were the people I was living with? What is this? Really? Wow, related to me? I don't believe it. My friends, this is when the echo started inside my head. If I screamed out loud, it echoes back. I don't hear voices. I don't have schizophrenia at all. The hit to the head caused the brain damage. My friends, this is when the echo started inside my head. See? I'm repeating myself. That's brain damage, folks. That was number one reason why I stayed away from concerts. Not because I considered myself better, but because there's only so much time allowed with my brain to enjoy festivities. Thus, we all know, I became a great musician over the years, and that's the number one reason why concerts are few. Even though we think, cool, all the tortures are gone, if I couldn't remember right, none of it would make sense. But now should make sense to all of you why my stories have always been far above and beyond. Because for the first year, when I lost my memory, everything seemed to be perfect. I was told this was my older sister, this to be my younger one, and now they introduced me to what seemed to be, for the first time, my baby brother. Now, even though things seemed to be normal, the name Mark was driving me insane. I did not understand at first what or why, because the story had now been given to me as my father being the guilty one for the crimes they were talking about. It didn't quite make sense to me. A daddy would never do such a thing. Ever. Ever at all. Find me one on planet Earth. I searched the planet to see if you guys were right about my father, in case I had it wrong. And all your fathers were better, so don't give me that crap. Fathers don't do that kind of shit. But my younger sister looked at me in the eyes and said, Dad had done this to us. I kind of left it at that for a while because I did not remember a thing at that time. The only thing is that the nightmares were beginning more and more, and now I started needing answers. When my sister told me, I believed her. She did seem like she remembered who it was. Well, she was wrong. Over time, the nightmares became worse and worse, and every time I heard people call out for my brother, I would get a clash in the mind, like someone was stabbing me in the head. Well, truth be told, okay? And truth be known, curse on all those who ever got it wrong. Anyhow, over the next 2 years of my brain started trying to tell me stuff. At first, we all thought I might had some kind of schizophrenia. Would make sense to me trying to explain the voice thing and all the past tortures slowly coming back to haunt me in my sleep, having me react in fear and paranoia stages that just seemed too far-fetched for anyone to listen to. My subconscious was still holding on to the truth, but my memory had no recollection of it at all. No recollection of it at all. Bringing us to the early 80s. Everything had now seemed to have settled itself. There was less talk of the tortures and more talks of the future, and thus made our family living a little easier for all of us. Maybe because this is where my art and stories started to scare everybody. Children's Aid Society was involved with us. Marie-Paul was back then our worker. She was actually one who sat down with me and asked about the situation. I am sure I told her about it. After she took notes, we decided to put a plan together for myself, where she had asked me where I saw myself in the future. This is when I told her flat out exactly what I am today. I wanted to be the best rock star this planet has ever seen. An architect and married to the most beautiful woman in the universe. One who technically really does not need to hear this story. But I'll lose you if I don't tell you. Because the others will lie about it. At this point in time of my life, no one even knew I had lost my memory. But this is what was said back then. Everybody is going to be alright, and we're going to have a great life. Well, fool I was to believe that. I did believe it. And maybe now that I'm older it'll be nice and beautiful. But one heck of a journey anyways to get here, huh? The next year changed my life again. But who knew this was coming? Grade 3 happened. Madame La Pensée, a female teacher. I'm not afraid of women that are overweight. I actually love you, even if you are. And I'm going to say your name, Taylor Swift. Even if you get big like that, I will love you just the same as I love you today, and I've loved you for the last I don't know how many years. And that's never going to change. But I'm a little afraid of overweight women. Even my mother today, because she's a little overweight because of this next episode there. So I'm not shaming you or disrespecting you when I put my head down and I go look somewhere else. It's just because I am really afraid still of being grabbed by the neck and broken in pieces. Anyhow, that teacher out of the blue decided that day that I was being too much of a handful, I guess. And so after a few jokes were said to my friends, that teacher grabbed me by the neck and threw me 20 feet into the back of the class, giving me whiplash, a damaged neck, and scaring me forever. When I came back to, my memory was gone again. To this day, I don't remember anyone from that class at all. At all, except for that teacher. Our brain seems to remember our tortures and very little about the beautiful stuff. Nonetheless, the echo was gone. That lasted 3 years, my friends. 3 years of every word I would say would be repeated in my head. That was annoying. I did not go back to school that year. I was home studied and recuperating from the damage. I did not go back to school that year. While society had the 3rd grade teacher and the school principal fired, grade 4 came along. And folks, and I was, grade 4 came along, folks. And I was too afraid to start school again. This is where I met my good friend Jules. One who seemed to have a great deal of resemblance to someone I thought I might know. So from there on, every dark-haired woman became Michelle. The story doesn't end there. I loved them all. They all had their spots in my heart and their time with me. But I will not trade what I've got going for me today for any of it. I couldn't remember anyone, and so Jules was the next one I fell for. I had told myself I don't remember everything, but this one, it feels like I've known forever. Was I wrong? Was I right? Who knows? What I do know is that I told myself I would not tell her anything in case. I would let this bird fly away and wait for her return. This is when the University of Ottawa, their McHugh department, decided to convince my mother that this placement would be a good thing for me. Joke was on me again. Before I was brought anywhere, I ended up finding myself too sedated for my liking. And I ended up stealing a $20 bill, a 75-cent Coca-Cola, and a 1 penny candy. All because I wanted to wake up. I felt I was going to pass out and really didn't like it at all. Totaling $20.76. The truthful extent of my crime days. All of which I did not get away with and gave it back right away, not even making it a crime. Plus being a child and all, right? It wasn't even a sin, according to French Pope Jean-Paul II. And that was decided in the 80s by that man. This moment here wasn't about me, but maybe today it could relate to something that might make sense to someone. I was walking down from the store up the hill when I saw a little girl try to pick up books she had dropped crossing the road. The bus she came out of never saw anything. I yelled out, yet the bus never stopped. It rolled right over her and squished her head like a pancake. Blood splattered everywhere, and I was in shock. alongside of about 100 other children as witnesses. I really tried not to think about it. It took a long time to come out of my shell from that moment. Although when I moved into the university campus, I was afraid even more so than starting school again. For the brain, they quickly realized there was something there. One, I was very advanced in all academic classes. Two, something seemed to have happened with my mind that would make it seem like I wasn't there anymore. They figured out ADD-HD, an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. For that, and after all research done myself there, I don't disagree. As my senses were thrown out of whack, they were starting to realize more had happened. The trauma to the head, my ADD-HD together, eyes would work, ears go low, capable of talking but not hearing at the same time, or vice versa, hearing really well and eyes not working properly. These effects are man-made and stem from the beatings, the monkey bars, the throw in class. Although I was not hearing any echo anymore, after the throw in the back of the class, my ears went all wacky and my memory was gone and my ribs were fractured. These people tried helping, so they say. Well, let me tell you how. They first teamed up in a room where two other boys lived also. Now I don't know if they were trying to find out about the past, but nonetheless, the two other boys ventured off into my bed. They wanted to experiment sexually. This was gross to the mind. It was freaky, and I was sedated. I nearly threw up to the idea. Nonetheless, the two of them did end up touching and rubbing in ways that are not permitted until marriage, and only permitted between a man and a woman, and should only be meant for a woman and a man to share, nothing else. Anyhow, the staff there did not condemn it. No one got in trouble, but the next day I was thrown in a white padded room and left there for a week. I got mad. There's not much I could have done, but nonetheless, I rampaged for days until no more energy was left. And they had the courage to walk in, and after I'm calm, put me in a restraining jacket before I awoke again. I just couldn't believe that this was happening and I was being punished. Anyhow, things eventually calmed down for me. One of the boys was transferred, the blonde one, looked like Copeland. The other settled down himself and apologized actually to me when I was allowed to return. A few weeks later, class started for me again, but my attention was no longer available, or normal for that matter. I contemplated running away, and that's when one of the doctors approached me and started asking questions about my mother. After that episode, they were ready to return me home to Mom. A whole year went by, and all these tests proved was I was a genius with ADD, bipolar disorder, suffering from post-trauma disorder syndrome. Brain damage, not sick in the head. McHugh had single-handedly created the bipolar with the homosexuality and then blaming me blaming me for it, locking me up in the white padded room for long periods of time. Had me convinced that someone or something was out to get me. Man, did I ever dream up a superhero to pull me out of that one. It's when I started writing the picture of Angel Heart. It felt like we were rats in a cage, being subject to chemicals and researches that would not agree with anyone today. There is a time inside McHugh where I really thought I was having an out-of-body experience. One of the white padded room episodes, I had a restraining jacket on, yet I recalled opening the white padded room door and walking all the way through the hallway, where one of the staffs brought me back and had to relock the door. I was then told later that that did happen. It was not an out-of-body experience. That was just too much sedation in my body. I asked if I could go back to my room with a bed, and I was told no, not going to be tonight. I went back without a fit and sat to fall asleep, where they needled me again, and where today, in 2012, I really hope that Anna Smith is for me. I ain't ashamed of what I survived. I'm ashamed of how this city handled it and why they let it go on so long. By traumatizing me in the situations where I had already been in and that my subconscious still remembered, you scared forever the brain cells capable of enriching my life by views and thoughts only. Since then, my brain's post-trauma disorder syndrome took over any normality in the proper function of a human brain being capable of staying happy or lifting the mood on its own. The post-trauma disorder syndrome was not diagnosed back then. This is something we figured out 25 years later. These are facts of life. Just living what I had lived so far would make anyone sick in the head. Nonetheless, life goes on. And after all this, Mom was told to keep me on the Ritalin as I was going to return home. Now, I didn't like the idea of the Ritalin, and so I started getting smart about it. Somewhat of a little detective work of my own kept me safe for a little while. Anyhow, the return home was fine with me. At that age, we all searched for a mom and dad. I would get to see my friends again and go back to school to meet more. By this time, my performing days were diminishing to almost none, only to have them start up again in a few years. I didn't want to believe what everyone was saying. I somehow knew Dad was innocent, and so these stories were quickly brushed to the back of my head every time. Every time someone else brought up the subject, I would try to ignore it. To this day, I know that the real guilty one has been walking loose and left unsupervised long enough to have at least another dozen more victims, whereas no one ever even knew. So easy to brush Bobo onto someone else that many more got hurt along the way by the real culprit, and then some, because the real culprit managed to walk free. Others got away with the Bobo too, and so there were plenty of guys out there like me. That's the reason the name Mark drove me insane. My subconscious was really trying to tell me something. Instead, I ignored it for a while. I wrote cool kick-ass stories. My return to Mom's house was a little different then than I had anticipated. One, my brother and sister thought I was coming back from Dad's house. I had to tell them no. I was at the University of Ottawa, and they did not believe me. So you can imagine what was going through my head now. Another story they don't believe. To a normal kid, it wouldn't have mattered, but to me, not being believed right off the bat discouraged me completely. I did not try to prove it to them. I figured that maybe they had it rough too, and so I left it at that. To avoid the same complications happening inside my head, I told myself I would watch over them, and so I did. Remember, folks, I was 8 years old at this point in time. Here is where everything gets a little freaky. I had figured out, freakier I guess, I had figured out by then that every Christmas for the last several years I was being sedated. And so upon my return, I contemplated tricking them and tried to see if I could figure out why and if I was missing anything. Was she giving it to me while I was sleeping? Was she giving it to me in my juice? Was she giving it to me in my cereal? I started being afraid and paranoid of all the food I eat. And still to this day I kinda am. My mother thought I was a handful, but also thought someone was trying to give me more, to get away with something far beyond what I have been speaking of so far. So I started measuring my strength and my energy levels at all hours of the day, even practicing sitting in front of a clock for days just to see if I would miss a second, just to see if I can figure it out. My memory wasn't completely back. By then I was feeling safe enough to be at home and getting stronger, as I was right in the middle of my growth spurt. I then practiced waking up every 5 minutes to make sure nothing was happening to me in my sleep. I did develop some paranoia. Unfortunately, the definition of paranoia means when the idea is above the norm of possibilities. And even though I did not have full recollection, my brain knew better. And so my paranoia was not paranoia. My paranoia was real fear. And so for me, paranoia was ruled out. I got real good on everything because I was paying attention and because I had decided to read everything I possibly could. And I mean everything. By this time I was practicing Kung Fu and yoga. I was an amazing little fisherman, always had something on my line. Things started looking up. I was getting ready really fast. I could do tricks on skateboards and BMX, to see through trails and more. I would build tree forts everywhere and would train every minute I had, every second. Every second left was a second gained, and so forth. Here my music was starting to resemble to stuff. I was getting good and getting good fast. To my knowledge, there was nothing going to stop me from achieving my goals and seeking justice one day. I trained so much, my mother thought I was going to war. After all, I had just finished reading her story. The Joan of Arc story is how they introduced what had happened to my mother to me. Anyhow, I wanted to be a better warrior. I didn't want the world to think I was something I wasn't. I wanted the world to know who I was. And I wanted to fight for justice without ever hurting anybody, without ever having to use my sword. Amongst my training, I was biking from the trails through the park one day and taking jumps on ramps when I realized there was the man there, coming out of the trees where I thought nothing of it at first. I went around one more time for a jump, and that's when he pulled out his you-know-what from his pants and waved it at me. Right in the middle of my jump is when I received a flashback in my head, reminding me of the exact man that had molested me. I freaked out, rode on my bike straight home, where I bumped into my older sister. When I tried explaining everything to her, she thought I was nuts. She then said, "No, your dad has been blamed for it, leave it at that." That blew my mind. It blew a fuse in my head. I went off and I grabbed a knife from the drawer, one being enough to chop off his you-know-what. My sister didn't even want to call the cops in order to help me. As I was getting ready to go get him, I saw another flash in my head. My older sister turned into someone else, and I cried out, "No, I don't." And then I heard a voice. Thought she was saying it, but her lips didn't move. I didn't know what I was seeing. At the time, today I would say, I'm sure I saw Michelle, and that's the voice that I heard. That's the voice that told me don't. And so no attempt was made. Instead, I threw the knife back on the counter. I left the knife on the counter. And I told my sister, someone better do something about it. Well, I was trying not to commit an attempt when I was on my high and lost and confused, and on my low, and it didn't matter anymore because Dad was in trouble for something someone else had done. And that's what blew my fuses. Anyhow, to this day I still have not yet attempted to hurt him. But I will spend the rest of my days raising awareness on what that creep did to my family. Proper statements in writing were given to the police force of Ottawa on more than one occasion. And to my knowledge, this man has never paid for his given crime. One where I have all the proof I need. A man like that deserves the chair in my books, at least so in the States. If I owned Greenland for real, I'd force him to swim away. I know he would drown in the hands of the devil. Here in Canada, you are not going to let the world think that they are allowed to do so. And so over 100 countries on planet Earth started helping me and training me, including my dear friend down south. Here's where sedation started sounding like a good idea, but my conscience kept telling me to stay awake. Tell Mom again. Don't stop. All these things were going through my head. Well, folks, weeks later, I somehow got caught up in the middle of a brawl walking back from school behind Sir Wilfrid High School, where I received my first ever bat to the head. And guess what? My memory was gone again. No one believed me. I guess it wouldn't matter. I guess I wouldn't even have believed any story I would have ended up having after that. What was I? Someone whom seemed to like taking that shit or what? I sure hell wasn't gay, even though I wasn't punished for pinching a few penises I nearly destroyed. So I guess to them, I look like somebody who liked that stuff. I don't know. Anyhow, I wasn't being punished, and they weren't being punished. All that homosexuality around us, and nobody was being punished. Yet every time I'd approach a girl, I'd get my head bashed in. I was wrong on society's part. Thus eventually would have made a homosexual. You are not born homo. They breed them. It's not allowed, folks, no matter how we look at it. I ain't ashamed to tell you that when I was 8, I touched an 8-year-old boy's penis, and when I was 9, I touched a 9-year-old girl's boobie kind of thing. Because if I would have liked doing that stuff, then I probably would have became a doctor or something of that kind. What I should have been told there was follow your heart. It's a good thing I did on my own anyhow. Anyhow, it nearly destroyed and killed everything inside of me. It was one fucked up way to show me the differences. This world was looking more and more disgusting to me as I went on. A man like that deserved at least to spend the rest of his days in prison. Look at the train of thought I, the 8-year-old boy, had. Now far from normal, don't you think? Far from normal. This nonetheless was the most fucked up part, because I had just suffered even more memory loss, so everything was gone again. But this time my name remained, and thus came out the awesome movies, Star Wars. And so I trained myself like a Jedi. Being the only kid with green eyes and blonde hair, I was a minority everywhere I went. I had a family that didn't believe me, or they were trying to hide something. And by the looks of it, something was trying to tell me back or train me hard. Another major concussion. At the time, I did not know all of this, but I still found myself learning, reading, and improving in all aspects of my world. Anyhow, while one big bad monster was revealed and forgotten, Mom was falling in love with a new monster of its own. Anyhow, Mom bought a cottage, and I was about to receive the creepiest year survived by anyone ever award. Little did I know I was going to survive this one. At the cottage that summer, someone had taken the screws off the handlebars of an old bicycle we had to play with. We were on our way to the store when I fell, slipped, and scraped the entire body of mine all the way down with the bike, flipped backwards with my feet touching my head, scraping all the way down with the bike on top of me, all on gravel, scraping the entire skin. That's why today I have holes in my face, all been scraped off all the way to my toes, like third-degree burn. And that happened back then. We had been to the hospital, and the hospital had put me on a watch for a few days. They had told my mother how to take care of me, and so we stayed at the cottage, and she applied lotion to ease the swelling and keep me awake as I was falling asleep fast all the time, just passing out. A little later I was introduced to the famous man that tried to kill me. I was talking to my mother inside the cottage. I was explaining to her what had happened at school and the meter that the principal used to use and how hard he would hit the table, but he wouldn't hit the table, he would hit me. And I was showing that to my mother. And Constantino saw from the window outside something, I don't know what he saw, but he came running in real fast. Like after he busted the door open, he grabbed me off the ground, and he didn't throw me, he grabbed me by the neck, and he squished me right onto the wall, snapping my neck, making me pass out. And then I remember, opening my eyes, and as I opened my eyes, the floor, the living room table was like, so he had grabbed me by the neck, squished my neck out on the floor, on the wall, up on the wall, off the floor, and then he had threw me on the ground, and I had bumped my head again on the table. And then I remember crawling up and sitting like this in a corner, and I was afraid. I was afraid of everything. I didn't know. I didn't remember nothing. My brain was doing all kinds of weird stuff. I couldn't explain anything. All I know is I was afraid, very afraid, and I'm not today. I blame Fearless for that. But nonetheless, when you're 8 years old, it's a scary time. All that training gone out the window, or so it seemed. As my everyday life started changing, I became more and more distant from the humankind. By the time school started up again, I was becoming quiet and stuck inside my own mind, like autism. I did make a few friends returning to school, but that didn't stop the Mr. Crazy from attacking me a few more times. One winter day, I went into school with a friend to try and recuperate my report card. I was going to take it. When I found it, I saw I wasn't failing at all, and so we left. 20 minutes later, the school fire alarm bells went on, and the school had caught fire. Well, friends, I was the one that was blamed for it. I spent time in prison for it. I was so afraid, I did not know what to do. The firemen started telling me they had proof and that they were going to blame me and bring me to court no matter what. I got really scared. For real, I said, I didn't even do anything. Well, according to us, that's not what we think. According to us is what they said. We have a witness, is what they said. I was here. I was in my head, here we go again. Somebody else in the world that doesn't believe me. Sacrifice. What else? was the world going to throw at me this time? The fireman said, "You're going away for 10, 15 years. I asked, really? I didn't want to be away from my friends that long. I didn't want to be away from my mother that long. That's when he said, if you plead guilty, it will be done faster, and you would only be looking at probation, being able to return to mom's house." It started making my mind all fucked up, but I was scared and a little stupid, but I did not want to be inside a prison cell for 15 years for something I did not do. That would not have kept me safe from all those monsters at all. Anyhow, I was tricked, and their tactics were an obvious abuse of their power. I never set fire to school at all, and I didn't only get probation. I ended up inside doing time, and then spent the rest of my probation in a group home, which is like doing time. My mother visited, but by now no one believed a fucking word I was saying. This planet seemed to be very wrong in my eyes, and I was getting tired of being hit down. Every year my mother would send me off to camp, and inside this entire story, in the darkest of the darkest days, I found myself in the middle of the planet, inside a cave deep underground, a place lost. I lost what I would call any normal chance of ever being normal again. Traveling inside those eerie caves, I found myself nearly drowning under a rock where we were supposed to just go through. Water had risen over and above its normal levels, and my foot got stuck in between a rock as I tried to get to the other side. Almost like someone was holding on to my foot. I eventually freed myself to make it across. Swallowing bits of water, I coughed and then opened my eyes to this planet's most gorgeous sight ever. That far long ago, Taylor Swift. A feeling not felt very often amongst humans, but nonetheless, one I still remember today. I really thought my life was going to end right there and then. I then sat down beside the most gorgeous sight, blonde hair, soft-spoken, also scared yet amazed at seeing me come up from there, as she had gone ahead of me and she had opened up to me like butter on bread and vice versa. Deep in the middle of the caves, away from all possible distraction and devilish ways, a connection was made. A picture was installed in my mind. We then built the courage together, holding on to each other, keeping ourselves warm, and back into the water we were. Heading back was less scary, but nonetheless the best see you later I have ever had a chance to share. Funny how in so much misery and pain, one little moment can leave just as big of a mark. Now if I was ever to reincarnate, I want to see my next life. And I want to see if my next life could have all these pains and miseries turned into moments like that one, then I would see, and then I would believe. Because moments of pain or misery leave the same engraving. According to Psychology 101, Taylor Swift's beauty and words have been haunting me since that moment. word for word. A good haunting. She's marking my mind with such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful flower image that brought on what came after I gave my biography. Year 2012, I made the best statement ever, and also have the best Hollywood rock and roll stars wedding proposal. But it wasn't going to be heaven for me this summer because I was now locked up. They locked me up right after. And yes, that thought did keep coming back. I never got to go back and venture some more to see if she would have been there again. I know she's not waiting in the cave for me. I was then released to a group home where I served my probation and where a few more things happened. One, I was playing Ouija board. For those who don't know what that is, it's a ghost game. It's a board that allows us to read what ghosts are trying to tell us, if we believe. Anyhow, lightning hit the wood board out in the backyard. The staff knew nothing about this, but the others in the group home saw it with their own eyes. I guess we were all kind of scaring each other in a good kind of family setting way, yet nonetheless in a prison setting. It was a lot calmer than at home. I was also afraid that my stepfather would make real on his threats that he had done to me. And so I didn't want to go back. He used to hold about 22 guns under the bed, under my mom's bed. What a crazy thought. Anyhow, I was about to start school again, and so yes, that's right, I was getting ready for a brand new school. I started school, and to my eyes, I had a chance to have a few years of normality, or so you would think. I got to see my friend Jules again. Out of the blue, she approached me, and I remembered her, like we had a connection. Anyhow, I was happy above and beyond, and really loved the feeling that was happening inside. You see how long it's been since a woman has made me feel like that? It's been that long. Like we had a connection. I wasn't talking to anyone because I was really still terrified of everything I had lived. That's when she put her hand on my shoulder and whispered in my ears. It sounds better out loud, Steph. I was playing music, and back then they liked it, and I didn't know. I know now, but I didn't know back then. I looked with a smile, felt good, and started talking to her. Normally like we known each other for years. And yeah, that was right. We had known each other for years. We did. But my syndrome would kick in, and no one knew about that, not even myself. Anyhow, I guess I didn't impress her much because she told me, "That girl?" And Nat has a crush on you, is what she said. Like she was introducing the two of us together back then. Anyhow, I fell for Nat, holding on to the feeling of Jules. We kissed once and started running fast. In my head, it was love that was guiding my strength. Was I right? Only time would tell. Anyhow, folks, these are the years where I accomplished the impossible. Running the 400 meters in 37 seconds according to me, and or 39 seconds according to my running coach. Since we both timed the event and both are right according to our recording devices, then as the runner I say, Michael, I did it in 37 seconds. I want to race you one day. Anyhow, at the time and point, I knew I would have to prove that score again someday. So keep reading, or here, keep listening. Nonetheless, friends grew there also. Some became brothers, and others, who knows. All the ladies, though, became marriage possibilities. Anyhow, I was focused on that, and would have carried forever hadn't been for what happened next. Anyhow, my brother didn't really mind the ghost stories. None of my brothers minded the ghost stories. They actually got a kick out of it. But what they wanted to know more on was the shocking and outer body experience. In other words, NDE, near-death experiences. It seems to give them chills and they always wanted more. So I went ahead and showed them a trick that puts the biggest guy on the planet go dodo real fast without having to break a sweat. And they experimented also. This all happening in a group home. We were kind of having fun till one morning a brother of mine and myself were playing with a can of aerosol hairspray. Anyhow, we were playing with it and then I lit a lighter in front of it just to see what it would do, like on TV, if it would do the same. Not because we wanted to do any damage to anyone or anything, just to check it, and then we would put it away. But anyhow, the can took flame and the fire would not die. When I lit the lighter and I pressed the hairspray can button, it made a little torch, just a little one. But when I stopped the lighter, the torch did not stop. The fire kept going inside the can, and the fire was still on. And I gave it to my brother, my buddy, and he took it and he tried to put it out, and it wouldn't go out. And we got like 2 seconds. I grabbed it from him and I dumped it in a sandbox, in a terracotta pot with sand in it. I dumped it in there in hopes that if it's in the sand, it won't do any damage or it'll go out. Folks, it scared the fuck out of me. It exploded. It exploded and it caused a big sound thing, like another kind of echo, but now where all my words are echoey. It doesn't repeat itself. Now it's like an echo, so the word lasts longer. So I started singing after that, and the singing kind of eased the getting mad at the echo kind of thing, because you're taking longer to say a word, there's less of a chance that it echoes. And so I started doing that. But nonetheless, it was an accident, and I was punished for it. I tell the world, we're sorry, I'm sorry, I did not want to hurt anybody or anything, but nonetheless it was just an accident. One where 2 of us would have been dead that morning in less than a fraction of a second. We were less than 10 feet away from the big bang. I was deaf all day that day. It took a while for me to come back to normal. Nonetheless, we're not done, folks. So we weren't just going to throw it out. So I went to stick it in the ground, but the ground was too hard. I opened the shed door and I saw the I saw that the fire had turned off. As I stuck the can in a terracotta pottery with bags of dirt in them, I stuck it inside, thinking I had just saved the day. 3 seconds later, kaboom, it exploded anyways. The extent of the damage, I was told, wasn't much, but nonetheless, a scare was there. And look, I was too. That can could have, or actually would have, exploded in our hands, and we would have been dead today. Otherwise, nobody was hurt. Instead, they sent me off to prison again. These firemen were very scary. This is another place where they told me they had a witness even after I had explained it to them. I just couldn't believe it anymore. Wait, there's more. After going to prison, I was sent to a mental. So to tell you the truth, I was punished for the crime. I did the time, but I'm not guilty. Beyond reasonable doubt, you could have saved my life a long time ago. Nonetheless, I was sent to a mental institution to have my brains examined a little more. I let them do what they wanted. They sedated me all the time. I was feeling kind of funny everywhere now. They gave me way too much. It damaged my insides. Anyhow, I was returned to the group home. I did not know what the heck was going on, but now I was tamed to follow. I don't have to commit crime to go to jail. The truth no one believes, and here I am again. School continued, and visitation home had started. There I was visited by Big Brother of the Big Brothers Association of Canada, where Lester decided to venture on me with his hands, molesting me. I froze and got real fucked up in the head and then passed out. I don't remember leaving there or if I was brought somewhere else. All that came back to my mind. It was just said and flashes of a bed that I did lay in, but I can't pinpoint that part of the bed 100%. Nonetheless, all this happened at this house, and so here is where I should have thought a little more, but didn't. I didn't remember anything else, or did I try telling my mother again? When I was returned to the group home later, I was playing downstairs, and all of a sudden we heard sirens. The bedroom upstairs was on fire. I ran up and I saw that there was debris on my train track, so I wondered in my head. I even thanked God, phew, because I did not assume what was about to happen next. I said, phew, I wasn't in the bedroom. I said, now they know it's not me. But the big firemen came downstairs. They wanted to talk to everyone. I started wondering maybe because it was my room, they would blame me. And of course, look at that. Hey, Stefan, we want to know what happened. I said, what? I was scared. That's when he said what he thought, and that's when I felt my soul run right out of my fucking body. I was so scared. I knew what he was going to say. The minute he said he thought it was me, I asked, "And you have a witness too?" Anyhow, off I was. While I was there thinking to myself, this would never stop, I tried to figure out who did. Or was it just an electrical because the train track had been flickering every time you plugged it in? Anyhow, according to my lawyer, this time I was really screwed. He said, "Steph, if it was just the first incident, we could help." That'd been incident number 3. I could free you, but it looks like you fire a lot. I was scared, did not know what to do or what to think. I followed instruction, and being as afraid as I was, I kind of started losing my mind. According to them, I was going to prison for a long time, and fighting it would be very difficult. That's when I lost trust in everything, including the system. I ended up serving more time to then be released to a new open custody house to serve the remainder of my 3-year sentence. Anyhow, I was getting excited to get back to school. I wanted to find Nat and Jules, and I was going to talk to them about it next time I started school again. But I seemed to find myself getting stuck when I would try talking to both Jules and Nat. Nonetheless, I was still madly in love. By this time, the end of the 7th grade finished. I was knocked out completely by one of the brothers in the house. That hit took a major toll on me and completely screwed up my brains forever. It fractured my skull and wiped out my memory again. This was one hell of a ride, my friends. This happened right after he stole my Palladium blueprints and my art. I guess they thought they were getting away with it. Who knows? What I do know is that since I have been touring, everything I touch turned into gold. The same colors as the Palladium, and the same colors as one big major corporation promoting art and software in my hometown. Right in the middle of my birth town, like someone was trying to sabotage me completely, or an angel was saving all of my work. I'm guessing, but with all that torture, don't you think if I would have killed myself, someone would have been a very lucky thief? So even if this is what they wanted, I was already at war trying to get justice from what I had already lived. I would have became a lawyer and won it all back instead of staying on my architecture journey. I started playing hockey here, and I was getting older and stronger, wiser and very fast. I jumped into karate and climbed and climbed and climbed. Here I found myself needing another friend. With no recollection of Nat in grade 8. Nat, why didn't you ever say anything to me? Anyhow, Jules' party came along, and Stephanie asked me to dance, and life changed all over again. We shared a dance, and Nat watched, and to me today, that would probably be her reason why. Nonetheless, I would say sorry. That must have hurt. Anyhow, I didn't know this till Jules told me about it later. Anyhow, the end of those school days were about to end. Halloween was coming and my mind wanted to dance. I get like that on candy. More please. Anyhow, the school was suspending me early. I wanted to go to the dance. My mind needed to know something. I knew something was up. I don't know what I was looking for at this point because my memory was gone. I got up, and as I lifted from the ground, the desk broke in half. When the broken piece was in my hand, I freaked out, scaring me more. Then I threw the desk to the wall to get rid of it. Feeling like a freak of nature, not knowing that I was that strong, I came back to, and all this to remember that I was never allowed to return to school. I did leave quietly. I did say sorry to the principal, the teachers, and now I guess everybody in that class. And if I hadn't had been traumatized by the first one, I would have opened up a little more. It felt like I could almost talk to anyone. Anyhow, my days as an athlete of the year was gone. In the home, I was beaten down. The same day, I walked in, I was told to sit there on the couch in front of the room, so I did. Moments later, a little dude I did not know asked me to go with him. I said, "Fuck you." He jumped me. I freaked out. A second jumped in. I kept going and third jumped in. I now had 3 adults trying to pin me to the ground. And I would not let them. The rage of the rapes and the rage of being guilty without being guilty drove me insane. To top it all off, my head kept saying, "Where's Nat?" A 4th man jumped on me and I collapsed to the ground. After so far 15-20 minutes of wrestling with 3 grown men on the ground, I wasn't done. Oh no, not at all. A 5th staff member got on top and they tried restraining me. They were not able for 3 long hours. I got carpet burns and dragged them all over the floors of the house. A few ribs of mine were cracked and fractured and ripped a few ligaments. All this why? Who knows? A 6th man came out from the back office and that's when I gave up. I told myself, fuck this. And that's when I said out loud, "Alright, I'll stop, just get off." And they slowly eased off before finally letting go. Anyhow, my bones and my muscles hurt for weeks after that episode. I then decided to start practicing to perform again and get the hell out of this town. By the time I was going to be of age, I would have disappeared. I was about to be released, and I had found myself into a church where I talked to a priest about some of the stuff, and the advice was carried far, my friend. I made a promise to myself and to God. I would figure it out and seek justice and become famous was my #1 priority. The more who knew the truth, the more I would have a chance to survive. I got famous in millions of different ways. Sports, friendships, work, studies, stage, at all levels, and in every rating category possible. Through words, through art, through books, through music, and now through television. Thank you for the internet. That was the icing. But damn you for the memory loss. Here, folks, my character changed. A little in ways that might have scared a few. Nonetheless, just enough to finally have things turned around a little. I got freakishly strong. In the mind, and in ways that scared a few more people. Not bad for a real-life biography. It's freakier than my stories that I write on the TV and in the books. Because you never know where the next one is going to be. This happened to me for real. Not one lie. Reality check, world. It was really out to get me and or my art. Deep down, I also think they wanted my smarts and wondered how I got strong for such a puny little kid. I never got to return to school, and so they let the bruising heal and then let me finish the remainder of my grade 8 at a high school in order to prep me for high school and for post-secondary education, where my hockey career was improving, my music was still being written, my stories got better, and I really got brave. I technically started high school the next year with a whole new bunch of people. What a difference. A lot like a fresh start. Anyhow, inside of me, and I didn't know why, but I was a little afraid of the water, and I wanted to challenge that, and so I picked my high school for that reason. It had a pool. Joke was on me again. They closed the pool the first day of school. Never got to swim there. I was 14 years of age, where my sister taught me a valid lesson on life. And my friends, that only of her making me realize that human sex is not a need at all. Not for me, please. Well, at this time, I did not know what to think. When I was with these beautiful flowers, I would feel like a somebody. Yet, I would get bashed in and nearly killed. And to me, it was worth it. When it came to the homosexuality, which disgusted me above and beyond, no one whom did got reprehended. And that disgusted me. The disgusting man and some children whom wanted not those those experimenting or finding out there are differences, is not something for just everybody. Okay? I was circumcised as a child. When I saw the first penis that wasn't, I was like, well, let's see, are there other differences? Right? I had green eyes my whole life. When I saw blue eyes, I said, oh boy, are there other differences? Maybe we'll find some with orange eyes. Huh? See? It's not a sickness in the head. It's what happens in psychology with the brain. Live 10 years of my life, you'll go through the same steps that I did. Fact of life. Stay tuned for the rest. My thoughts on my father, who is innocent, might have been in prison For what? Again? A crime not committed? That's two in the same family. I wonder how many more the system screwed up. I ask myself that every day. A little while later, I thought maybe because he didn't protect us. That's what came to mind, but this is just theory right now. I wasn't going to give up, and I was still going to make my first time special. She was going to be the most beautiful and happiest of them all. This was my train of thought. After my sister sent me in the right direction, I couldn't even get an erection. Not that it mattered for the time being, but by next year it would have. Still no recollection of most of the past. Little by little pieces were coming back. I then moved away on my own. I was happy. No more sedation. I was happy. No one in my house to steal from me. No one in my house to bash me in. Say, all that stuff. And I was still attached to my good friend Annette. My nightmares, whom I had just met. My nightmares had increased, but my time with Dee had decreased. One, herself beautiful, sweet, soft, caring Dee. We did grow a little apart from then, but I never really let go of the natural beauty these past souls had carried into my world. The way I thought I would have to have waited a few years in order to respect her family's wishes. I needed to finish school, and I also had to start thinking on how I would compete in the corporate world. I did all of this and kept my friend Dee forever. This is where I started drawing new houses, my architecture designs, a journey that just blew them away. Yet the storytelling is what was keeping everybody interested. Wow, what a journey. They would get if they knew the truth. Well, this story is. If my far-fetched stories were keeping you all on your seats, what would be their reaction on my real-life story? So I told myself I'd wait till I was old enough to handle it myself. So my life, I held on to until my world was ready to handle it. In the creation of this balance, I stayed friends with all of them. I really do not have enemies at all, and by this time, 16 years old I was. Living on my own, driving my first car, and continuing my foremost needed education. My first goal was so, as I aimed for the pros playing hockey, I studied my brains out in order never to be left behind. I was acquiring skills and training in many different fields in order to widen my horizons in the near future. To my surprise, Jules came back and started in grade 10 in the same school as I was this time. I took it as a sign, but wasn't capable to react on it. She then came up to me to talk about Nat. Guess what? Who's Nat? I couldn't remember at first until she started telling me about it. Anyhow, a reunion was held and I was reintroduced to Nat. I was amazed. I was amazed that the feeling was just like we had known each other for a long, long time. And bam, I remembered. We kissed as she asked me to leave politely. I did, and then kissed Jules for leading me back to her. Before I left, just in case I was the one who had it wrong. Just in case. I was going to let Jules know my true feelings in case Nat didn't like what she saw. I never saw either again. Cruel, don't you think? I do. The next day, I was knocked out again by the biggest guy in our school. But I got up again with bits and pieces of my memory. Nonetheless, this is where my friends introduced me to a new friend, and where I had to star over. I've been acting since there, my friends. Right here, when my friends introduced me to Julie C. Becoming rich and famous was now priority number one. Yes, surpassing my memory bubbles, I started writing down certain things every day that over time helped a lot with my memory. Reading, rereading, the past, oh boy, all these things. I started running for track and field, where the 400-meter run I surpassed myself and scored world record times in the semifinals, and bam, won, say, a 4th place in the final. Nonetheless, failing to enter the world as I had lost in the final, but still held on to a 37-second world record. Not one word of a lie. And to tell you the truth, I did not have to win to feel like this today. High school was advancing well, and I was getting impeccable scores in certain fields like science, architecture, gym, social studies, geography, and more. Juniors were now calling me up for tryouts, and I was just about ready to start entertaining with my music again. The stories started getting mixed up, and I wanted no part of it. Anyhow, before school ended, I started performing a few more places, like bars, karaoke, all kinds of stuff like that to get me back into the game. A lot of fun karaoke was doing that across Ontario and Quebec. As I worked, it was a job for me, over and over again every night for years. I then finished school. As I played hockey, and where I was a prospect, I also found time to start performing again. Here, I will have to thank that I couldn't remember everything, as my stories started getting dull. So did my music. I was slowly losing that crowd. My music seemed to have started reviving everyone. Little by little, the crowds got fun and more numerous again. By night, the rock star, by day, a world student, till I graduated with honors and was crowned prom king. I was well on my way in a total different direction. It pays to remember. The memory of who I was in love with might have been all fucked up in my head, in my mind, searching for a ghost, I tell you. But nonetheless, the cause of the great, wonderful, beautiful art I was hiding and painting along the way. My friend D was there on and off, and a few girlfriends I had the opportunity to date afterwards. All flowers I did fall in love with, and whom had the right to know the truth. Nonetheless, the beauty of these few selected souls is what made it possible, and what made performing available again. Certainly not the terror. The terror caused the art and the space cadet inside of me. The beauty caused the music and the performances I cannot perform without. As I started performing, fame got as big as it gets out here. Nonetheless, I wanted to take it to the higher level. I wanted to take the chance at changing the world on my own, and for the next few years, I slowly started doing so. Volunteering a few places to increase my face in the public as one of the people and not just a star. I was also training to rescue and help in emergency cases. I held down another job furthering my career in the construction field, working on kindergarten schools, famous players, famous Odeons, churches, homes, and so much more in the fields of plumbing, framing, finishing, laboring, and more. I then moved on to building businesses and helping friends build theirs. I ventured school above my own capacities and started learning and putting things together like I was Einstein. I also then spooked myself a little with my own ghost stories and miracle sighting. I ventured into witchcraft to try and figure it out and try and see if there's a connection between that and God. Then the more into religion I tried to figure out, the more religion turned into witchcraft. And so the two combined made a very powerful energy setting around my surroundings, and so the venturing continued. I then caught myself helping more and more people try to get rid of unwanted ghosts of their own surroundings, or sometimes just to call a grandma or a lost friend kind of thing, until I stopped myself from doing so. I was being haunted myself, and I really didn't know what it was until years later. I started looking into psychology a lot more. I had done so my entire life. My mother was big on those psychology books, and I read them all. I so tried to see if I could come up with an answer that would make sense of that part, but still to this day I cannot explain the phenomenon. Anyhow, turning into an adult here, I decided it was to be left to the movies, and so I started directing little movies of my own. Since high school, folks, aside from the children we have made, nothing's real. I've been loving you off someone else's love. I was in the wrong somehow. And that's why today there's only Taylor Swift, and it's been like that for years, and as far back as the cave. It's beautiful. I started drinking, and little by little the ghost stories stopped. The nightmares did the same, and it became a lot easier to ask a woman out on a date. And so I thought I had found the perfect combination. The drinking led me to losing a few jobs, though, for sure. But I didn't care about that. What I cared the most for is what this time I lost all on my own. Without getting hit to the head, the alcohol led me to more suffering, more memory loss. As I drank to forget the pain and tortures little by little, I, Stéphane Poulain, was left with no friends at all. It still took time for this to happen, but before it climbed up again, my future was going to leave me on a journey I couldn't have imagined myself. But this time, every time I would leave someone, I would return to see where Dee was in her life and her reality. But really, to suck up the beautiful energy we had created for ourselves. See if it would keep me going. And with Taylor Swift, it does. As she was now looking at me like a brother, as I was being told, I did not want to believe anything else but what I knew to be real and true. While in my mind, the picture of someone kept coming back, and so I drew and painted and tried to write music and see if the picture in my head would disappear. I guess it never did. I worked nonetheless all the way through and always found myself with more work. There were no shortage of jobs in my country at this point in time. I slowly started to slow my drinking down. I continued working and added to my schooling. I also ended up getting myself suspended for life in a hockey game once. It kinda ended my career. As I tried to communicate with the 7-foot referee, he pushed me over the goalie net and as I got back up, he told me to leave the ice. I never played hockey again. Captain for a game, a junior opportunity came up the next year, but a baseball game ended that chance, as I had been flipped in the middle of a field trying to catch a ball. My right foot and ankle was shattered, ripped ligaments and fracturing and breaking dozens of bones. Depression started kicking in. I jumped in the air and this happened in the air. And guess what? Nightmares were coming back. Working 120 hours a week to avoid sleeping is really how I gained most of my experience. I started feeling a toll on myself, but nonetheless never gave up and continued doing what my father had taught me: how to make a plan, a blueprint, and stick with it for success. College, university, and more work, yet my friends were dropping from thousands to hundreds. When it went down to a dozen, I started wondering why and what was happening. I didn't know society had contemplated an idea of their own. I continued working when I decided I couldn't wait till I had no more friends. I had to find a wife. And so lucky me, I found one. I didn't know she was going to be my wife, but our time shared together was getting more numerous and very delightful and enjoyable in a very calm and relaxing way. I was falling in love fast. I ended up getting married to this one, as she gave birth to a daughter of mine. I was working on Plan A and trying to find more work to help support the family while my new wife finished her schooling. After I had met her, she was going to be my first wife. I started getting approached by weirdos from out of town. Over time we became somewhat friends when one of them had an idea that I kinda liked. We had put together a perfect plan. We were going to fake my disappearance, and I was going to run away with $50,000. The trick went wrong, and others might have heard us talking about it, ended up at my rendezvous point. I didn't quite know what was going to happen. I started talking to take control. I was going to include them all for $5,000 or something. Well, bam, I was attacked on the army base in Ottawa. I don't know if they took the money, but what I do know is I was nearly killed and raped by 5 men as an adult, right there. Not before a battle between us, but these fuckers just wouldn't die down. I knocked a few down, but they still managed to get me good. I then awoke in the hospital. I was then told that a woman police or paramedic was the one who had found me. In time, I guess. I never got the chance to thank that one, but nonetheless, I was dead. Now, no money, bad memory, and no fears. This bringing us to 1999, where I saw my wife give birth to whom she told me was mine. Born with blue eyes, I wondered a little, but did not want to think that the one I had just married could have pulled this on me, and really had no reason to believe anything otherwise. I, with green eyes, really thought I could only make green-eyed babies, and so it lingered for a while until it was late. It was too late to look back for the child's sake. And so even if today there are more than one child that could be mine, DNA would tell me I must keep walking, believing they are or not, as you all have to agree with doing the best thing for the children in mind. Why I end up the last to know was another cruel thing. A few years later, working 80 hours a week at one job and more hours at another, I ended up in a freak work-related accident that disabled me for life. I was replacing carpet roll when one fell, fracturing my skull, 1,500 pounds of pressure, also damaging my spine. I have never recuperated. To this day, I cannot do the things I used to do. One time, after a CAT scan at the hospital and a few other tests, the hospital doctors tried to run a spinal tap on me. For what, I don't know. I'll assume that the fluids, or at least they were trying to look for some fluids, or they wanted to know about brain activity. Anyhow, one doctor came into my room and took a spinal fluid, or at least tried. He tried 3 times before stopping and telling another doctor that he just couldn't achieve his goal. Another doctor then came in and tried another 10 times. My spine was numb and hurting. My legs were paralyzed from my back all the way down to my toes. Later they told me they couldn't get it. The doctor also did not believe I could feel my legs. After making his mistake, doctors know never to try more than twice on a spinal tap. It took a while for the doctor to come back. When he did, he picked me to see if feeling was in my legs or not. There were no feelings at all. Later he told me he was going to release me, discharge me. I got confused. That's when my wife back then was called to pick me up. A few hours later the doctor helped me up. I had trouble feeling my feet, but feeling slowly came back. Anyhow, he pulled on my arms, and that's when some feeling came too, but not before causing lifelong injuries to my spine. To this day, I hold back tears of invalidations you probably wouldn't understand. Fuck, it hurts. How a man like me, who had never asked anyone for anything, in his entire life ended up nearly crippled after surviving all this, still be knocked down on the road to success. One of this planet's greatest humans slowly being destroyed little by little. Still did not know why at this point in time, but still don't today. This is why I am writing the truth one last time, in hopes that I never get hit again, in hopes that everybody after me is treated fairly, in hopes that one day I find someone who will stand by me, knowing my truth, understand me as the only truth and the story to be just as. This here is my truthful biography and is set to be sworn in. Anyhow, one day we were having an argument and my wife was getting hysterical. I did not want her to startle the children, and so I tapped her. She stopped right away, and the kids were never affected by it. But nonetheless, the police that day decided to charge me with domestic charges, to have me removed from my own home, and grant my wife the chance and choice to move away or end the relationship. The relationship didn't end. We loved each other, and that tap was not an assault, but more of a, wake up, come on, we don't need this. We just went through hell and back. We want life to be beautiful. We want to stay calm. We can fight without ever lifting our voice. And that I have learned. Anyhow, harassment started. With a punishment of 1 year probation completed, I would now be a criminal record guy. Like that made a difference in the way I was thinking. But with my wife talking about her father being ill, I wanted to bring the grandchildren closer to the West Coast, to give her family a chance at knowing our kids. 911 happened, and off we were. Once more, had made a phone call and was not believed. So I myself and my ex-wife packed our precious belongings and drove across nearly 6,000 kilometers to get to beautiful British Columbia. I didn't try to re-establish myself over there, but was a little unsuccessful at first. It took a while for me to start getting prospects, and my in-laws were getting impatient with my recovery. One day in BC, Canada, I was trying to buy a second car for us, and my wife got hysterical again. I wasn't going to tap her this time, but nonetheless, I ended up in prison anyways. I didn't tap her this time, and nonetheless, I ended up in prison anyways. Grandpa or Grandma had exaggerated a story, believable enough for the police to check more into it. 30 days later, I was released, and I never returned. I had now just lost everything: friends, wife, kids, house, car, dogs, and so much more. I was already disabled, wandering the streets of BC, till I found myself singing again in a karaoke bar one night, and where life freaky, dangerous roads ended. And a new light was shared. I seemed to have had impressed quite a few, and so the next day I started searching. One, need a car, so I found a job, and then paid the car. Bonus. Then I toured everywhere. Everywhere. Went down to Hollywood, Seattle, most of BC. Then I found someone who was willing to help put a plan A together, finish plan A together. A series of songs I had written over the years. This went pretty well. I thought we would produce. This went pretty well, I thought. We produced Angel Heart, the album, and off I was, working on promoting it and performing it. I performed a few places and started getting work for Hollywood. Worked on Elf, Miracle on Ice, all kinds more. Did over 1,000 production over the 2 years after that. You would have to look up on the website to see them all. Nonetheless, I have worked on hundreds of productions, and it all started in 2003. Now separated from my ex-wife and children, I promoted with all my might. Even sold 200,000 copies of this album across the country and overseas myself. I tried to sell as many as possible, but it didn't make a difference. They were costing me more to make than what I was giving them away for. So while everything was lost, it now slowly started to turn around again. Slowly I was making friends and future prospects, great performers from across the world I started playing with, and then it happened. Had to leave, had to tour, had to find what could one day be mine. I left BC and toured the country again. This time I added, and I was also performing a new album called The Green Light. And thus came along the next 12 albums. I was touring with my guitar, and so met a million new friends. And thank you, because a new life started everywhere I walked, with my Enrique's look instead of my Afani look and my guitar. And to those fans, I will hold you dear forever. They can't damage that image. Let's just hope I don't lose my memory again. But nonetheless, I was coming back east as somewhat of Joseph the Color Dreamcoat dude. I was not expecting what was about to happen next. And I was getting divorced as I was writing the best music ever. I had now decided to work on my own feature movies. Here in Ottawa, that is all I have been doing for the last 7 years, is working, making movies and music. That's it, that's all. The only thing real about me is how good of a musician I am, and my love and devotion I have for Taylor Swift. Fact of life. I was attacked a few times again in the East, not knowing why. I didn't give up. I continued working on my productions and then met someone new. I then dated a few actresses, even might have made a few more children, since for me DNA will tell me only. Nonetheless, wasn't until I met you that I discovered this, and why all this was happening, and finally a reason to never have to write or think about my own tortures ever again. Anyhow, my sales went from 200,000 copies of Angel Heart album, 50,000 copies the combined other 12 albums, and I was really wondering why from there that someone new ended up helping quite a bit. Although it got rough for me. What I ended up discovering was good enough to make me the busiest man in court for the next few years, and most likely a very, very, very wealthy man. The Children's Aid Society had decided to meet up with me, and my new common law girlfriend, wife, is now gone, and she'll never return. That's a fact of life. Anyhow, we gave birth to my youngest daughter 3 years ago, and one thing led to another, and a SWAT team was called too. What for? I don't know, but I can tell you what happened though. Holding on to my newborn daughter, they pinned me after talking about nothing for an hour, banging my head on the cement brick wall of the hospital before removing me from the room and bringing me outside, where they told me they were going to release me, but never did. Instead, they had me enter the prison system again and gave me a book about this thick of what society thought about me. And so I was beaten up again inside prison. When those prison guards read those papers, they nearly killed me inside the cells. Twice. For the hands in the pocket thing, I don't know what that means, but it's all that's registered, hands in the pocket. I couldn't answer more than that. But I do know that that SWAT team deserves to be reprehended for making a false move. And so I spent the next 3 years trying to rewrite it and make a movie about it. And also tried to make a movie about the Constantino, the mad crazy man that tried to kill me as a child. And that's what we were doing while my ex was staying with me here on my set. Completely. Everything has been recorded for the last 7 years. Everything. I got 10,000 hours of television for a station that's going to pay proper. Anyhow, that's what was happening here. A few months later, the society would not let me see my own children, and so I had to try and find ways to get back in her life. Simple reason was because when they took her away, she got ill. She's gonna have the same bobo as me, and that is it's very important that you can't do that to a child like that. We'll never be able to leave that child alone. The one person that attaches himself to her will have to stick around forever. You keep doing that to her, you will damage her entire life. And that's cruel. I cannot do anything more. I don't have power over these societies. But I can tell you one thing. Court system works for everybody. After they beat me up inside prison, the second time, they released me the first time after 30 days. After that, I tried to get back into my daughter's life, every which legal way possible that I could. I even had to prove to the judge, hey, I've never been on drugs. Here's a P-test, a legal one, look. And that's when I guess the judge decided to bring the child back home. They started trying to pin being sick in the head on me also. And yet, 3 of their most famous doctors here in Ottawa, none of them say I'm sick in the head. So, technically speaking, my fans, they don't call me all kinds of shit. They say, he's a nut. Yeah, right on. I see, he's cool nut. He's not a nut. Huh? But they don't go up to my windows and start yelling, you sick in the head, you sick in the head, you sick in the head. That's the police, the Ottawa police that is doing that. Hey, come on in the ward. What kind of police force do we have? Anyhow, me and Joe contemplated something that we probably shouldn't have done. But I ended up being arrested 6 months after the hospital scene. And my lawyer was supposed to show up the next morning to have me released on bail. And so he can have an added amendment done to the release forms, whereas I could see my daughter under third party, whatever, say, just a little something like that. And the Children's Aid Society made it even harder and did not want that to happen at all. So anyhow, my lawyer was drunk and he never showed up. And so I ended up stuck in prison. But this time I ended up stuck in prison for 65 days. That was a long time. Yeah? But if you just go do your time, it's one thing. I'm on a remand that's not even guilty of these charges. Look. Huh? And I was getting beaten up all the way through. I wasn't even doing anything wrong. And it didn't stop. It didn't stop there. Police has not stopped harassing since. Got it? There's been 13 more charges since that episode. 13 more charges. All 13 charges dropped. When are these people just gonna stop charging? They got nothing to do. Is it like speeding tickets? You gotta charge so many people a year. I'd like to know. You know, I say it's good knowledge. I teach my son proper. I see in the future. You know. Over time, I realized also that in my case, Your Honor, the provocator was the aggressor. I'm being sandwiched here. Anyhow, again, forced to sit in those cells. When I was released, I had suffered again a few more concussions on 2 separate occasions. When was it all going to end? That's what I started asking myself. When would I get to decide to sit down? When would it be my turn to speak my truth? When would I get the chance to have one person in power, like Your Honor, to sit there and take the chance to, maybe I am telling the truth? I've never even been given that chance. I was eventually released with the right to have access to my child again, and where I fought and where I won. I won full custody and full guardianship of my children. I, as a father, have always and will always let mommy lead. And in my case, there's more than one woman that bared my children, so they lead their children. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is a decision we made in the beginning, because when you choose to marry someone, you have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you're gonna run into a lot of unexpected stuff you don't want to be part of. Anyhow, all that's settled in my life, and everything there is fine for me. There is no problems between me and my children. Okay? The world can leave that at that, because I am going to make another family. And that is a fact. Since then, started a tour I call the ABZ tour, performing greater hits of mine, released hundreds of new releases since also. The tour, the Spider Tour, is facing your fears. It's exactly like Fearless, but in a different way. I put on a movie about one fear before every show. I have 26 fears, and there was 26 letters. I called it ABZ Tour because A's been done, B will be Birmingham, London, England. That'll be B, and then C, I don't know, and then D, and then F, and then E, F, G, H, I, J. Then cities will be named by the letters of the alphabet. New releases, like there's more new releases. There's releases right now. Orlandsupin is a movie based on a real story, just fun comedy, futuristic, fun comedy stuff. A little bit about what happened to me in my past and stuff, and what led to it. And then A Childhood Decay is a new movie, and that's available. And that I play just a normal president of the United States that's married to a blonde. He's got a whole bunch of children, and my ex-wife is dead, but she haunts me. And as she haunts me, I end up being haunted. That's A Childhood Decay. And then in the end, I have to go tell the wife, but I don't tell the wife in the movie. On top of that, there's 7 more full-length movies coming out in the near future. That you'll just have to wait till it's done. Until then, it's just music. Like Crazy Dada Papa, Saint Afon, Stevie Nicks, all those things. That's all me. Fact of life. I have been working with great deals of doctors to ease the bobos and to help with the depression. I am not on any medication whatsoever, except for an anxiety pill before a concert. Aside from that, there is no chemicals whatsoever in my body. I am now a vegetarian. I hardly eat meat. Nobody will medicate Poland for the rest of time. And I stand for that. Anyhow, these doctors did a good job when I needed them. But instead of hurting myself with more chemicals, or even to start thinking revenging for anything, I would look up at the sky and ask God to do it for me. I will never avenge for anything. But in court, I should be getting compensation for everything I've survived. Being a trauma victim, a head trauma victim, you should all read up about it. It's not a sickness and a head. It's brain damage. There's a difference. And I'm not ashamed to walk the rest of my life knowing that I suffered brain damage. But I can't turn around and tell the world, maybe I shouldn't have done this or that, because that would be a lie. Nobody deserves what I survived. Nobody. So to top it all off, this is when I was recently threatened, not too long ago. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. So I asked Joe to call the police for me. And when the police came here, I showed them, I said, this guy here, I think threatened me. Can we at least know if it's real or not? police officer said I was schizo. He started going on his own idea, and he started telling Joe that he was going to have me arrested. And I was like really scared as I was close to my balcony thinking, huh, they're going to try to hurt me again. I just called them for help one last time and they arrest me again. I couldn't handle it. All these cops had to do was go talk to the guys and say, hey, you want to kill Poon? No? My goodness, see, that's all I wanted to know. And say, as simple as that. Sacrifice in the court system for 6 months to a year, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's a waste of taxpayers' money, and I'm a taxpayer. So I know how people of Canada feel when we spend our time wasting our time and money in something that, what are we doing it for? So with all this said and done, I, Stéphane Poulin, have always been innocent. I, Stéphane Poulin, will never commit a crime. Ever. I can't even bring myself to sin. As little as a little white lie telling Joe, don't call here again. I can't handle it. And she keeps calling and keep calling. But the last phone call, I lied to her. I told her I was gone. I was gone, don't call back, I won't be there for a week. And she called 10 times since. That's okay, she's not over and stuff like that. I understand pieces like that. But you have to understand that I don't sin. I'm never going to love that woman. You've heard the stories. I belong with Taylor Swift. Only. She decides. Nobody else. For the rest of my living days, I want that soft, caring person around me. Only. To this day, I, Stéphane Poulin, have yet to have failed God, or the law, for that matter. Even after all this torture, I, Stéphane Poulin, have yet to retaliate. My book of psychology reads, in the end, I will enter his kingdom. My way of life is actually what keeps me going. After all, I have by this point performed over 10,000 performances globally. You just have to believe. I took all your religions and life, country rules and laws and invented a way that keeps even the most depressed and scariest people on the planet and gives them a way out. A way out without dying and without killing anyone. And so life without love would not be possible for a guy like me. I must love if I want to live. And like one of my top written songs, life is love. I must hold to those words as they are what made me. With great power comes great responsibility. With great things comes great opposites. With great tortures must mean one day great pleasures. Thank you for your time. When I leave Ottawa, all those who did not get a chance to shake my hand and ask for an autograph, there'll be no reason to fear. On my part, there'll be no return. On their part, all the bad ones are almost all in prison. Over time, if there's only one guy not in prison, I think I did good. As for the rest, enjoy it. Don't harass it. Enjoy it. Because there's less and less and less coming. I, Stéphane Poulain, swear that this was all the truth, as God is my witness. Sworn in. Thank you. Peace out.